What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. Just a quick announcement before we get into the video. I will be doing a birthday / Christmas live stream tonight, so if anyone's around, be sure to jump in. We'll have a good laugh before I have a break tomorrow for Christmas, and I'll return again on Boxing Day. And of course it is my birthday today. I'll hope to see you all there. Now, it seems a Scottish economist has come out and rubbished the SNP's claims that they would be better off if they were an independent nation. Now, I've said this many times that of course Scotland receives a lot of money from us, a hell of a lot more than they make themselves. We are currently subsidising the Scottish government's spending plans because, like the Labour Party, they do love to spend a lot of money. With this economist stating figures that show the SNP would take Scotland instantly into deep austerity to cover the 10% loss in revenue Scotland would see. Of course, the SNP will deny this because they want to get independence regardless of how much it costs the average Scottish voter. And then let's not forget their version of independence is to leave the Union of the United Kingdom and rejoin the EU, which as we all know is undemocratic, meaning the Scottish people will have absolutely zero say on the laws that are passed on top of them. Plus, we will need to rebuild Hadrian's Wall because of freedom of movement that Scotland would get if it rejoined the EU, obviously. That is something the UK does not want, as the referendum and 2 elections have clearly stated. Now we're going to look at the Express article that headlines, Sturgeon Blow. Political expert reveals the biggest obstacle in the way of independence. An independent Scotland would immediately be plunged into austerity as a result of being deprived of revenue from the rest of the UK to pay for public services. With the problems posed by Brexit paling by comparison, an economist has warned First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, and I expect she has completely ignored it. The SNP, which won 48 seats in December 12th's general election, is training its fire on UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Good, he will just laugh at her. With Westminster leader Ian Blackford insisting he lacks a mandate for Brexit north of the border. Ian Blackford, you lack a mandate north or south of the border, you tosspot. So I'd shut your mouth, mate. Newly elected SNP MP Kenny McCaskill, meanwhile, claimed the UK was becoming the 51st state of the United States of America under the Tories because, of course, he's a scaremongering loser who doesn't have a clue and has just listened to too much BBC Scotland and, of course, the SNP shitweasels talking about Orange Man bad. We are not going to become the 51st state of the USA at the end of the day. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. It's more scare stories. A bit like selling the NHS and £50,000 to have cancer treatment. It's not going to happen. It was just a load of old bollocks to get themselves some votes. Much like in the 2016 referendum when they said the country would go to absolute shit if we voted to leave. Guess what? It didn't. However, John McLaren, a professor at the business school at the University of Glasgow, warned it would be far from plain sailing for Scotland if it ever voted to leave the UK in a future independence referendum. Speaking to German-based financial news website Cash, Professor McLaren said the difficulties of Brexit are nothing compared to the problems that Scotland's exit from the United Kingdom would entail. Well, Brexit is a 40-year union, Scotland is over 300 years of union, so yeah, I would say it's pretty obvious that the difficulties are going to be far greater leaving the UK than us leaving the EU. Scotland would have to do without a lot of money, unlike the UK, which will save money as a net contributor if it leaves the EU. It's not if it leaves the EU, it's when it leaves the EU, mate. I'm pretty sure the Tory party know that the voters who voted for them this time will quickly evacuate them if they try to go back on their promise to deliver what the people voted for. I'm sure Boris Johnson and his team around him, like Dominic Cummings, are fully aware of that. They had been warning about it previously, that going against what the electorate wanted would be career suicide for these politicians. And look at how many of them got drained from the swamp for it. So I would definitely say it's not if we leave the EU, it's when. They will have to do it eventually, and I'm sure Boris Johnson will have to do it, because he knows he will be swiftly gone and will forever be remembered as a stupid blonde Maybot in trousers. So yeah, I'm sure Boris Johnson is going to keep to his word to some degree or another. We will leave the EU. It may be Brexit in name only, it may be Brexit. Like I've said before, it's still very much up in the air. Anything is possible because, of course, he's a politician. You can never trust them. It's pretty much the same for every politician, though. Scotland has been a net beneficiary since North Sea oil revenues have dried up. Independence would therefore lead to austerity. Well, there you go. Looks like your oil fields are not going to cover you, Nicola Sturgeon. What are you going to do? Because I've heard Ian Blackford running around saying that our oil fields can actually cover their spending. Well, this economist seems to think differently. And as we will see in a minute, he actually has some statistics to back it up. The Scottish Government would have to plug the hole in the budget that would be caused by the exit. Professor McLaren added, proponents can always claim that the economy would benefit from independence. Scotland's problem would be tax revenue. Scotland would lose 10 billion in Britain's annual transfer payments. This corresponds to 10% of the Scottish budget. How can the Scottish Government rebalance the budget? Obviously they're going to have to raise taxes and they will have to take austerity measures like slashing public services, which, as we all know, will swiftly see the SNP's vote share drop rapidly at the election following it. There are a number of difficult questions that the SNP has not yet answered. Professor McLaren also suggested, despite their apparent enthusiasm, Mrs Sturgeon did not want a second referendum any more than Mr Johnson does, in the short term at least. He explained Boris Johnson does not want to allow this, and although the SNP says it wants a referendum, that's not true. The time for it hasn't come yet. According to polls, the electorate is divided. The ratio between opponents and supporters of independence is 50-50. I've said it many times before, polls are a load of bollocks, especially when they sit that close. If each party is far apart and one of them has a leader like Jeremy Corbyn, then I suppose the poll stands more chance of being correct because, of course, Jeremy Corbyn is completely unelectable. And here we have the figures there for Scotland versus the UK's revenue and spending. So from 80 to 1990, they were actually paying money to us, £5,000 per capita, more than we was giving back to them. But then here you see, from 1990, almost exclusively with the exception of 2008 to 2009, the Scottish economy has been massively funded by the rest of the UK, obviously. We all knew this, it's been said many times before. Neither London nor the SNP currently want a referendum. It will likely take a few more years before there will be a referendum. Speaking last month, Scottish businessman Kev In, pro-union think tank These Islands, disputed Mr Blackford's claim that Scotland was a net contributor to the UK. Tweeting figures, he said, backed up his analysis. He posted, as worded, that at I Blackford, obviously talking about Ian Blackford, who has actually blocked this guy's claim, is complete nonsense. The clearest analysis comes from Scottish Government figures used for graph here. So the graph above was actually done by the Scottish Government. When this graph is red, Scotland is a net beneficiary of fiscal sharing. When black, it subsidises the UK, as I've already said. The graph in question suggests Scotland has been a net beneficiary in every year since 1990, with the exception of 2008 to 2009, like I just said when I looked at the graph myself. Scotland was a net contributor for the 10-year period from 1981, a fact Mr Hague attributed to the oil boom. Speaking in Parliament on Friday, Mr Blackford himself accused Mr Johnson of blindly hurtling towards the cliff edge with his deeply damaging Brexit plans, arguing it will leave people poorer. And this goes back to yet another Remainer MP who is extremely salty they can no longer prevent Boris Johnson from passing his Brexit deal and getting on with it. The 80-seat majority has taken all of the power away from the previous Ramona Parliament's MPs that are still left in this current one. And, as you've seen by a couple of videos I've done recently, they are in absolute shit fits. I love it. It's great news. Blackford is especially salty, and you know I love the salt mining. He added, we reject this toxic Brexit legislation and make the case clear that this UK government cannot drag Scotland out of the European Union before gaining the legislative consent of the Scottish Parliament. Mr McGaskill told BBC Radio Scotland, I think by the time we get to next year, the people of Scotland are going to realise the direction of travel that Boris Johnson is taking Britain on. I believe that more and more people in Scotland will say that that is not the society they seek. And I'm sure the massive tax hikes and austerity you're going to bring them in an independence referendum, should it succeed, is not the society they seek either, you idiot. The only way to avoid being taken into becoming the 51st state, a country where the social services, the welfare state is being dismantled before our very eyes, is to vote for independence and to become an independent nation in the European Union. And there it is. Let's vote for independence so we can become subservient to the European Union. These fucking SNP idiots are incredible. And I have heard reports that a lot of former pro-SNP voters are turned away from them because they want to rejoin the EU. And to be honest, I wouldn't blame them. Why would you want to go from one union to another if you want independence? It makes no sense. But then again, the SNP are thick as shit, so we shouldn't be surprised, I guess. Fellow Scot Michael Gove, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, said the Scottish Government should be focused on the issues that really matter to people, improving the NHS, fighting crime, and helping to improve education. And I'm pretty sure Scotland has got the drug death capital of the world award at the moment, so maybe they could deal with that. You know, probably more important right now than the SNP wanting independence and to bring austerity onto its citizens. But these are all rich people, so they don't care about austerity. Austerity really doesn't hurt them, does it? He said the Scottish Government has a lot on their plate. My friends and family in Scotland want them to concentrate on improving the NHS and making sure Scottish schools are better. I want to work with the Scottish Government to make sure the Scottish people's lives are better. And that's the end of the article there. But essentially, the SNP are looking to take Scotland into austerity and lumber its citizens with a shitload more of debt. And this is coming from the University of Glasgow. So it's not coming from an English, Irish, Welsh or anyone else, it's coming from a Scot. And they've used the SNP's actual figures. But to be honest, this is something I already knew. I knew that Scotland received a lot of money from the UK. Much like the EU, it receives a hell of a lot more money than it pays back to us. So yes, while an independent Scotland would be beneficial to the United Kingdom, it's not something I would want. They just need to get rid of the SNP. Then whatever Scottish government's in there can try and do a bit of a better job of keeping their spending under control. Because that's what it is, they just simply overspend and receive a fuckload of money from us. When it's not your money, I guess you don't really care. And that's much like what the SNP think. The same of course is true with Labour. And I would expect, to some extent, the Tories. Though they are far more conservative with their spending plans, obviously. But on that note, guys, I am going to end the video there. Before I go, though, I do want to thank our PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar, and YouTube members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell, and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I'll see you all in the next one.
And Corbyn neutral by Christmas.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going and we are glad to be going. We're off.
Ramon! Ramon!